This is Lead with Love, and I'm your host, Cynthia Iorio. Welcome to Finding Myself. Helen Keller famously said, "Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved." I remember hearing that quote for the first time, and it was as though somebody was hugging my heart, because it really spoke to everything that I went through in my caregiving journeys. In the last 3 months of my mom's life, she was hospitalized. And so home for the both of us became the bed in the semi-private room right by the window on 8 Northwest at the Montreal Jewish General Hospital. I literally spent every moment by her side, except for about 6 or 7 hours during the day between 12 noon and 7 o'clock p.m. when I would go home and I would crash and get about 4 or 5 hours of REM sleep, take a shower, get back to the hospital in the early evening so that I could be there with my mom overnight and help her when she maybe would wake up, she would have anxiety, she'd need to go to the bathroom. And we'd get up in the morning and I would be there for the doctor's first rounds and I would take all the information down and I would accompany my mom to different treatments during the day, whether it was immunotherapy or radiation on her brain or whatever else, an other type of treatment that she was having in order to help ease the pain that she had. And it was a very special time. It was a trying time because I lived in a hospital and I wasn't just visiting and I also wasn't sick. So I saw how the hospital operates. I saw other people suffering. We had about 4 different roommates that came through. We were in this kind of separate world that neither of us had really been exposed to, and that had its own ecosystem. It had its own pulse. It had its own ways of working. And so we were learning and adjusting to the different dynamics of what it was like to be going through the illness, but now in a completely foreign environment. And during that time, I decided that I was going to journal and I was going to capture some of the things that happened at that time, maybe to revisit, because I knew my brain was going to forget a lot of that stuff just because I didn't want to remember it, but also because there were some pretty magical moments within those days. And I recently came across a journal entry that I wrote and I actually entitled "For the Textbooks." And reading through it now kind of sends some chills through my body, but reminds me of a moment that I will never forget. So it was about 5 o'clock in the morning on March 25th. My mom had just been told that one of the final experimental treatments that we had tried was not working. And it was liberating, even though it was devastating, because now we knew it was time to stop fighting. And at this time of the morning, my mom woke up and she seemed a little bit agitated. And so they adjusted her oxygen for her. And she just kind of looked over at me and caressed my face and just told me she loved me. And we started to reminisce on what it was like to be with each other and on all the really special times we'd had with one another. And then I went silent. Here's the excerpt from the journal entry that I wrote next. Then I told her something that has been sitting on my heart and in the back of my mind. Your death has saved my life. As a single woman in her mid-30s, I struggled to find who I was. I was chasing an identity that was shaped by your hopes and dreams for me, a career, a profession, and not in a bad way, but, I said, Going through what we've gone through in the last few months, I've had to rely on myself. I've had to go through this alone. I have found my meaning, not my purpose, but my meaning. And I am woman, and I can never go back. So thank you. She smiled and put her hands back on me. I love you, she said. She died 7 days later. One of the things that I struggled with following the death of both of my parents was transitioning from the role of caregiver, which had consumed so much of my life, into becoming kind of a regular person again and reintegrating into the world. Have you seen other caregivers struggle with this? And what advice would you give somebody as they try to reintegrate?
So I think a key piece attached to that is almost a preventative piece. And it goes back to sort of what I said earlier, is that caregiving becomes our identity sometimes. And I can speak as a caregiver as well. The prevention piece is recognizing that you have multiple roles all at a given time. And so you can be family caregiver and daughter and mother and healthcare professional all at the same time. And if you can balance that and take care of yourself as you're a caregiver, the transition to not, to being, as you said, a regular person then becomes a little bit easier. But I think the key aspect to that is be patient with yourself. Understand that grief is so individual, and it's a unique process, and there's no exact time frame that I would like to put on that. And so being patient with yourself, figuring out what matters to you is also critical. But the other piece is sometimes I hear family members say, now I have to move ahead, I have to move forward. But it's not about moving forward, it's about integrating the loss as you move ahead. And I think that sometimes it's a little bit tricky because you think of our language, it's been a year now, you should be moving on.
Should is such a bad word, or it could be a disruptive word, is what I want to say.
So much pressure on the family caregiver who has spent X number of time, months, years looking after somebody that they loved. And now we're trying to figure out who they are without that person in their life. Where does all that time go? Where does that energy go? And so I think that, the simple way to answer your question is to be patient. Be patient with yourself. Go back to rediscovering the things that matter to you. But I would really stress the prevention piece. And this is why we talk a lot about self-care for family members, is as you're immersed in the caregiving experience, to make sure you look after yourself, to not forget or neglect those other identities that are coexisting with the caregiver identity. Because if you can keep those together, then when the caregiving identity, that percentage needed, fades, you have the other identities that are still there that you can kind of pull on. The other piece is use your network. It's hard to caregive alone. And so as you try to transition into a different role, to look at the network of support that you have around you, because that's going to be important as well.
You just heard from Anita Mehta, Director of Education and Knowledge Exchange at the Montreal Institute for Palliative Care. Those of us whose superpower it is to run into the burning buildings instead of away from them possess a certain reckless abandon that others don't. And we don't know if the building is about to crumble or how much time we have, but caregiving is like that. When you're watching someone suffer, you can feel like you have nowhere to turn. And the only option is to throw yourself into caregiving entirely. Caregiving becomes a part of your identity, and it can be all-consuming. Whether it's by choice or by circumstance, dealing with and coming to terms with who you have to be in order to care for a loved one is a process. It is an ever-changing experience that can rip you out of autopilot and at any given moment, throw things off balance. It puts into question your coping mechanisms, and it forces you to constantly reevaluate your priorities, whether consciously or unconsciously. And it tests your strengths and it amplifies your weaknesses. But there are lessons, like the lessons that I learned, that I carry with me every single day. 3 of which are: 1, it's not any one person's responsibility to fix or save anyone. 2, the greatest gift that you can give someone is the gift of your presence. And 3, we are where we're supposed to be. And when my father got sick 7 years after my mother passed, I was able to draw on those lessons and to do things a little bit differently. I didn't resist as much. I accepted more. I realized that if life was meant to be any other way than the way that it was in that exact moment, then it would be. So I had two options. I either go with the flow and shed what wasn't serving me in the moment, whether that was going on a leave of absence from work and taking advantage of the Canadian caregiver leave. It was finding childcare for my daughter so that I could be by my dad's side. It was accepting people's offers to send, lunch to the hospital where I was, people's offers to come just sit with me in the hospital waiting room or come in the room with me with my dad, but not to do anything, just have that company, doing things a little bit differently so that it eased the pressure on me. And it made things a lot easier. I'm actually grateful to be able to say how grateful I am having gone through the experiences that I have with both of my parents. And it has taken a lot of work and a lot of therapy and a lot of time to be able to say that and to acknowledge the value and the privilege it has been caring for both of those people, the value and privilege it is for caring for another human being. And I'm not the only person who found profound meaning through their caregiver journey. Katrina Prescott, this year's recipient for the Canadian Centre in Caregiving Excellence's Award in Caregiving Advocacy, echoed the same thing when we chatted. Way before you were thrust into the role of caregiver, I want to know what your life was like and what your ambitions were and your dreams were before your mom got sick.
Firstly, I was like, when was that? Because I am a lifelong caregiver in a sense. First for my grandfather who lost his vision when I think I was 5. We drove down to get him. They were traveling and we had to fly to Texas and help them drive back. And then he passed, and then my grandmother. And then I guess most recently is what you're referring to with my mom, which was really the biggest caregiving experience I have had and probably will have in terms of effort and time and impact on my life. Before I was caregiving for my mom, it's funny you ask that because I think about this. What was I doing before? What was I doing?
It's almost like you can't even remember life before caregiving because it became so embedded in you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, I was living in New York. I came back to help with grandma and then right after mom.
Where was back and how old were you?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. I was back to Vancouver and I guess I was in my early to mid 30s. I'm not great with time. Because it doesn't really exist. It's a concept. But anyway.
Right.
So I came back and, I was doing things. I worked. I'm a producer and I was working as a producer. And I did yoga teacher training. And I've always, in like 2007, I think I became a holistic health coach. So I had a little bit of that going on, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with all of the things. I was just kind of rolling along, doing yoga every day. To be honest, I don't really feel like I had a path or direction. And caregiving really did give me that passion and purpose and direction. And as challenging as it was, I'm so grateful. So grateful.
I don't think I ever really planned on going on a journey of finding myself. I was never into self-help and wellness and all of that before my parents got sick. And I even cringe a little bit talking about it because it's so cliche and, so misunderstood and a lot of people don't understand it. But the reality is that I needed to turn to something to help me understand how this really profound experience of caring for my loved ones changed me. And looking at myself, like really holding up the mirror and looking at all of the things that I've just gone through, it's easy to deflect rather than to reflect. Working on yourself and looking at yourself is a privilege and an opportunity that are not offered to many either. After having given and devoted so much time for my parents, taking a little bit of that love and that passion and that curiosity and turning it towards myself has actually been quite cathartic. Searching for yourself is a continuous journey, trying to find out who you are, what motivates you, what challenges you is an ongoing process. And just when you think you've figured stuff out and you've healed from a wound or you've moved on from something, life will smack you upside the head and remind you again that there's something else to work on, and that's okay. Accepting that we have strengths and that we have weaknesses and that this is just a human experience that we're all going through has been a gift. I think family caregivers don't always realize just how important they are, not only to the person that they're caring for, but to the medical system, to the people in the community and in the network of the person that they're caring for, and how valuable that they are, not only to that person, but to themselves. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that finding the right balance to care for yourself while you're caring for somebody else isn't a challenge, but oh my goodness, is it so important. Some caregivers might feel like they have to do it alone. Some caregivers might feel like they have to do everything perfectly and everything right. And the reality is that when you're caring for another human being, while you're caring for yourself, there is no right. There's just love. Everyone's just trying to do their best. And family dynamics and a broken medical system and the want to not be there and do that and be doing the caregiving and the resistance to it and the pouting and the frustration, all of that comes into play. But there's no right answer. There's no one right way. And it's really easy to forget at times the reasons why we jump into that role in the first place. And the reality is that it always starts with love. And it's important to remind ourselves of that. What I've learned in speaking with so many people and doing my own research is that there are tons of resources out there for caregivers. And it's not perfect, and there's definitely ways to improve. But I'm going to post in these show notes links to websites, links to organizations, links to groups, people who are there, who are advocating for caregivers to offer you help and make you feel seen and acknowledged. I want to thank you all for being on this journey with me. This has been an absolutely wild ride. I wish you all courage to face your challenges with grace, to ask for help when you need it, and most of all, to remember and remind yourself that you can never go wrong when you lead with love. If you like what you heard today, please follow, rate, or subscribe to Lead with Love on the podcast platform of your choosing. Be sure to check Lead with Love out on Patreon, where you can subscribe for exclusive access to extended interviews and behind-the-scenes content. Talk to you again soon.